History is full of stories we have yet to fully understand. We are about to travel the world to uncover 30 of the strangest historical sites on Earth, places that defy simple explanation and force us to rethink the past. By the end, you will possess a new perspective on the ingenuity and mystery of ancient civilizations. How did a single man move stones heavier than elephants, and why would an entire culture bury its greatest treasures? What forgotten ambition do you think is still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet? Standing guard on the Giza Plateau for millennia, the Great Sphinx presents us with our first great historical contradiction. It is a monument so familiar, its image reproduced countless times, yet its true story remains fiercely debated. Officially, this colossal limestone guardian is linked to Pharaoh Khafre, believed to have been carved around 2,500 years before the Common Era to watch over his nearby pyramid complex. The alignment and stylistic clues seem to support this, but then you look closer, and the questions begin. The most compelling argument for a much older origin comes not from artifacts, but from the stone itself. Geologists examining the Sphinx body have noted deep, vertical weathering patterns, gouges that look less like wind and sand erosion and more like the effects of prolonged, heavy rainfall. The catch: the climate of Egypt has been predominantly arid for the last several thousand years. The last time the region experienced rainfall heavy enough to cause that kind of damage was arguably around 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, a period long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. This is the core of the controversial Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, a theory that, if true, would rewrite our timeline of ancient high civilization. It suggests the Sphinx could be a relic from a forgotten epoch, perhaps only rediscovered and refurbished by Khafre's people. Adding to the intrigue are the monument's obvious wounds. Its missing nose is often wrongly blamed on Napoleon's troops, but historical sketches show it was gone long before his arrival. And then there are the persistent rumors of hidden spaces. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have indicated anomalies, possible cavities or tunnels beneath the Sphinx, particularly around its paws. While these could be natural features or later modifications, they fuel speculation of a hidden chamber, a hall of records containing lost knowledge from a pre-pharaonic age. So we are left with a riddle in stone. Is the Sphinx a 4,500-year-old masterpiece of the Old Kingdom, or is it a far more ancient sentinel, its original builders lost to the depths of time? The debate itself reveals how a single monument can hold two completely different histories within its weathered frame. The Sphinx challenges our timeline, but across the sea, another ancient wonder challenges our very understanding of purpose. On the windswept Salisbury Plain in England, Stonehenge stands as a silent circle of giants. Its iconic silhouette is known worldwide, yet its original meaning has been meticulously erased by centuries. We know the basics: a monument constructed in stages over more than 1,000 years, beginning around 5,000 years ago. The largest sarsen stones, towering up to 30 feet tall and weighing an average of 25 tons, were dragged from quarries over 20 miles away. But the smaller inner circle, the bluestones, tell a far more dramatic story. Geological analysis confirms they came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a staggering distance of over 150 miles. How did Neolithic people, without the wheel or metal tools, accomplish this? The leading theory suggests a combination of sheer human effort, clever engineering, and possibly water. They may have transported the massive stones on wooden sledges and rollers, maneuvering them onto rafts for river journeys, then hauling them overland again in a monumental logistical feat that would have required the coordination of an entire society. But why go to such extraordinary lengths? This is the central mystery. For a long time, the dominant theory cast Stonehenge as a prehistoric astronomical calculator. Its alignment with the summer solstice sunrise is precise and undeniable. On the longest day of the year, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, flooding the center of the circle with light. This suggests its builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of the solar cycle, using the stones to mark the seasons, which was vital for agriculture and ritual. Yet, more recent archaeology paints a richer, more complex picture. The discovery of a vast settlement at nearby Durrington Walls, a so-called superhenge, revealed it was a place for the living, filled with the remains of enormous feasts. Meanwhile, Stonehenge itself appears increasingly linked to the dead. Excavations have uncovered numerous cremation burials, leading some scholars to propose it was primarily a domain of ancestral spirits, a final resting place connected to the eternal cycles of the sun and moon. Another compelling theory suggests it was a center of healing, a Neolithic Lourdes. The bluestones from Wales were believed to hold magical, curative properties, their arduous journey itself a testament to their perceived power. People may have traveled great distances to chip pieces from the stones for talismans or to undergo rituals. So, was it a celestial calendar, a temple for the dead, or a hospital of the ancient world? The most likely answer is that it was all these things at once. Stonehenge was not built for a single purpose, but evolved as a sacred landscape where astronomy, ancestor worship, healing, and communal gathering intertwined. It represents a profound investment of belief, a physical manifestation of a world, where the earthly and the cosmic were inseparable. The stones do not whisper one secret, but many, echoing the multifaceted spirit of the people who dared to move mountains. The ambition to reshape the landscape connects Stonehenge to an even more audacious project, one so vast its creators could never see it in full. Far to the south, etched into the sun-baked plains of Peru, the Nazca Lines present a paradox of scale and perspective. This is a gallery where the canvases are entire valleys, and the artists could only appreciate their work from a vantage point they could never physically reach. Created by the Nazca culture over a 1,000-year span, from roughly 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after, these are not mere scratches on the ground. They are geoglyphs, monumental drawings made by the meticulous removal of the dark, iron oxide-coated pebbles that blanket the desert, revealing the lighter, creamy soil beneath. This simple contrast created images that have endured for millennia, and what images they are. A hummingbird with wings outstretched over 300 feet. A spider nearly 150 feet long. A condor with a wingspan that would dwarf a modern jetliner. There are spirals, trapezoids, and straight lines that run arrow-straight for miles across the rugged terrain, often converging in clearings like ancient airport runways. This very appearance has, of course, fueled one of the most famous fringe theories, that these were landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors. But the truth, while less sensational, is a far greater testament to human ingenuity. The Nazca people achieved this precision with simple tools and profound understanding. Using stakes and ropes, they could scale up small models into these colossal figures, their straight lines guided by sighting posts on distant hills. They worked with this stable, rainless environment, knowing their art would be preserved by one of the driest climates on Earth. But the enduring question is why? Why invest such tremendous effort into art you can only properly see from the sky? The most accepted theories are deeply rooted in the Nazca worldview. Many scholars believe the lines were ritual pathways, walked during ceremonies to invoke the deities associated with the animals depicted, perhaps to plead for water in an unforgiving desert. The geometric shapes and lines may have pointed toward water sources or sacred mountains on the horizon. Another strong theory links them to astronomy, suggesting they aligned with celestial events like the solstices or the rising of important stars, acting as a giant calendar for agricultural and religious cycles. The most poignant idea is that they were meant to be seen, but not by people. They could have been messages or offerings to the gods in the sky, their full form only visible to the divine eyes looking down. The Nazca Lines force us to consider a different kind of logic, where the value of a monumental act lay not in human admiration, but in spiritual communication. They are a reminder that our ancestors often built for an audience beyond the horizon, creating legacies whose full majesty they trusted to faith and the future. The lines of Nazca were a message to the heavens, but on a remote island in the vast Pacific, another ancient people carved their legacy in stone for a much more earthly purpose. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as its people called it, is one of the most isolated inhabited places on the planet, a speck of land over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Yet here, a thriving civilization achieved something that seems almost impossible, creating nearly 900 colossal stone statues known as moai. These brooding giants, with their elongated faces, strong brows, and solemn expressions, stand sentinel along the coast, their backs eternally turned to the sea, as if watching over the island's interior. The sheer scale of the work is staggering. The average moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs around 14 tons, but the largest, named Pero, is a behemoth nearly 33 feet tall and estimated to weigh a breathtaking 82 tons. And then there are the crowns, the giant cylindrical pucao made of red volcanic scoria that sit atop some of the statues' heads, each adding several more tons to the already immense figures. For centuries, the central question was how. How did a people with only stone tools, on an island with no large animals for draft power and no wheels, move these multi-ton monoliths from the quarry at Ranoreraku, where they were carved, to their ceremonial platforms, or ahu, sometimes miles away across rugged terrain? The mystery was so profound it fueled wild speculation, including ideas about lost continents or outside help. Modern experiments, however, have revealed a far more impressive truth rooted in human ingenuity and teamwork. One compelling theory, supported by local oral tradition and successful tests, suggests the islanders used a technique called walking. By carefully rocking a statue from side to side with ropes, teams could literally make the moai shuffle forward in a controlled, upright position, a method that would explain the worn paths found leading from the quarry. Another theory proposes a system of wooden sledges or rollers atop a prepared road of smoothed earth. Regardless of the precise method, the movement of a single moai would have been a monumental communal effort, a symphony of coordinated labor that united the island's clans. This reveals the true purpose of the statues. They were not gods, but deified ancestors. Each moai represented a powerful lineage chief or important figure, their immense presence a manifestation of mana, or spiritual power, believed to protect and bring prosperity to the community that erected them. The ahu platforms were sacred sites of ancestor worship, the focal points of a complex and competitive society. But this story of monumental achievement is shadowed by one of profound tragedy. The island we see today, largely treeless and grassy, was once a subtropical paradise covered in a lush palm forest. The very success of the moai building culture may have sown the seeds of its collapse. Evidence suggests that as the population grew and the statue-building rivalry intensified, the forest was cleared for agriculture, for rollers and sledges to move statues, and for logs to serve as levers. This deforestation led to catastrophic soil erosion, the loss of raw materials, and the collapse of seabird populations. Without large trees, they could no longer build the sturdy canoes needed for deep-sea fishing, drastically shrinking their food supply. The result was a devastating ecological and social crisis. As resources vanished, the societal structure built around ancestor worship and statue construction shattered. Clan warfare erupted. In this period of turmoil and hunger, the statues themselves, the very symbols of ancestral power that failed to prevent the disaster, were systematically toppled. The moai were pulled face down from their ahu, their stone eyes blinded to the ruin of the world they were built to protect. So the mystery of Easter Island is not a single question, but a profound duality. It is a story of breathtaking human innovation and profound cultural expression, perfectly married to a cautionary tale about the limits of an isolated environment. The silent moai now ask us not only how they were made, but what happens when a society's greatest ambitions outpace the fragile world that sustains it. The fall of Easter Island's society speaks to the dangers of isolation, but another discovery suggests our earliest civilizations might have been born from a very different kind of gathering. In the stark, rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, a place called Göbekli Tepe stands as a profound challenge to the story we thought we knew. For decades, a fundamental rule of history was clear. First came agriculture, the domestication of plants and animals, which allowed humans to settle down. Only then, with stable food supplies and organized societies, did we have the time and resources to build monumental temples and complex cultures. Göbekli Tepe shatters that sequence entirely. This site is staggeringly old, its oldest circles dating back to around 9,600 years before the Common Era. That makes it a full 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, constructed not by farmers or city dwellers, but by nomadic hunter-gatherers. The scale of their work is breathtaking. They excavated massive limestone pillars from local quarries, some weighing over 10 tons, and erected them in a series of at least 20 circular enclosures. These are not rough-hewn stones. The T-shaped pillars are smoothed and often elaborately carved with a menagerie of ancient animals: foxes, boars, snakes, cranes, and fierce predators like lions and scorpions, rendered with an artistic skill that rivals much later cultures. The sheer effort involved is almost unimaginable for a society without permanent settlement, requiring the coordination of hundreds of people over generations. This forces a revolutionary question: what if monument building came first? What if the need to gather for a shared spiritual purpose, to create a sacred space like Göbekli Tepe, actually provided the social glue and organizational spark that later made agriculture and settled life possible? The purpose of the site remains a mystery, but the prevailing theory is that it was a ceremonial center, a pilgrimage site for scattered hunter-gatherer bands across the region. They would converge here at specific times, likely for rituals that reinforced social bonds, exchanged knowledge, and performed feasts, as evidenced by the bones of thousands of gazelles and aurochs found on site. The carvings may represent a complex mythology, a spirit world of animals that these early people sought to commune with or appease. Then, around 8,000 years before the Common Era, something equally mysterious happened. The people of Göbekli Tepe deliberately and carefully buried their entire monumental complex. They filled the great stone circles with thousands of tons of soil, rubble, and stone tools, sealing them away for millennia until their rediscovery in the 1990s. Why would a culture entomb its greatest achievement? Some archaeologists suggest it was a ritual decommissioning, a respectful retirement of a sacred space whose time had passed, perhaps as beliefs shifted. Others propose it was a practical act of preservation, protecting their temple from something, or for someone in the future. Whatever the reason, this deliberate burial is what preserved the site in near-perfect condition, gifting us this time capsule. Göbekli Tepe is more than just a strange site, it is ground zero for rethinking prehistory. It tells us that the human impulse to create meaning, to build something larger than ourselves for a communal purpose, may be the original spark from which all civilization eventually grew. The temple did not come after the farm, it may have built the very society that would invent it. From a temple that rewrites the dawn of civilization, we shift to a modern myth born from the open ocean. The Bermuda Triangle is a different kind of mystery, one not carved in stone but charted on maps and etched into popular imagination. This loosely defined area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico in the western North Atlantic has become synonymous with vessels and planes vanishing without a trace. Its legend is a powerful cocktail of genuine maritime tragedy and speculative fiction, creating a puzzle where the line between fact and folklore is as treacherous as the waters themselves. The myth truly took hold in the 20th century, fueled by a series of high-profile incidents. One of the most famous is the loss of Flight 19 in December of 1945. This was a training flight of 5 United States Navy Avenger torpedo bombers that took off from Fort Lauderdale on a routine exercise. The experienced flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reportedly became disoriented, his compasses malfunctioning. Radio transmissions revealed growing confusion, with Taylor insisting they were over the Florida Keys, when evidence suggests they were far out over the Atlantic. Despite clear weather, the entire squadron, with 14 crewmen, vanished. The rescue plane sent to find them, a Martin Mariner flying boat with 13 men aboard, also disappeared without a trace. The official Navy report could only conclude the cause was unknown, a verdict that left the door wide open for speculation. Another cornerstone case is the disappearance of the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy cargo ship, in March of 1918. With over 300 people aboard and a load of manganese ore, the ship vanished somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore. No distress call was ever received, and no wreckage was found, despite one of the largest naval searches in history. It remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in United States Navy history, and the complete lack of evidence made it a perfect source for supernatural theories. But when we separate the sensational stories from the documented data, a clear picture emerges. The United States Coast Guard and global insurance agencies consistently state the Bermuda Triangle is no more dangerous than any other similarly trafficked part of the ocean. The region is a heavily traveled shipping lane and flight path, and statistically, the number of disappearances is not abnormally high given the volume of traffic and the area's often volatile weather. Science offers plausible explanations for many of the reported phenomena. One compelling theory involves methane hydrates, ice-like deposits of methane gas trapped on the ocean floor. A large, sudden release of this gas could create a massive bubble that erupts to the surface, drastically reducing the density of the water. A ship caught above such an eruption would lose buoyancy instantly and could sink before a distress call could be sent. This could also explain aircraft losses, as methane rising into the air could disrupt engine combustion or create sudden, violent turbulence. Then there are rogue waves, walls of water that can appear unexpectedly and reach heights of over 100 feet, capable of overwhelming even large vessels in a single blow. The area is also known for its rapidly changing weather, with sudden, powerful storms known as white squalls that can form with little warning. Furthermore, the Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, a line called the Nazca Line. This can cause compass variations that, while navigable with modern GPS, could have confused sailors and pilots relying solely on magnetic compasses in the past, leading them fatally off course. So why does the legend persist with such power? The enduring mystery of the Bermuda Triangle lies less in supernatural forces and more in the human psyche. It represents our deep-seated fear of the vast, unknown sea, and the unsettling idea that something, even in our modern age, can simply disappear without an answer. The open cases, like Flight 19 and the Cyclops, provide real anchors for our imagination. The myth thrives because it fills the uncomfortable silence of an unsolved investigation with a narrative, however fantastical. It is a modern folklore, a cautionary tale for the technological age, reminding us that for all our instruments and knowledge, nature can still hold the final card. The triangle's true power is not magnetic, but narrative, proving that a good story can sometimes become more real than the facts it obscures. While the Bermuda Triangle is a mystery written in wind and water, another enigma is contained within the fragile pages of a single book. Housed in the Banach Rare Book Library at Yale University, the Voynich manuscript is a puzzle that has defied every attempt at a solution for over a century. This small, 240-page codex, crafted from fine vellum, dates to the early 15th century, likely from northern Italy, but its age is the only simple fact about it. The manuscript is written from left to right in an elegant, flowing script of around 25 to 30 unique characters, an alphabet that matches no known language on Earth. Its pages are lavishly illustrated with scenes that are at once familiar and profoundly alien. There are sections filled with bizarre, unidentifiable plants, their roots and leaves drawn with precise, scientific detail, yet resembling nothing in our botanical records. Other pages show intricate astronomical or astrological diagrams, with circular charts populated by suns, moons, and stars arranged in confounding patterns. Perhaps most strangely, there are sections depicting dozens of nude female figures, often oddly proportioned, bathing in or connected by an elaborate network of tubes and vessels filled with a green, possibly watery substance. The overall impression is of a serious, scholarly work, a textbook on some forgotten branch of knowledge. But what knowledge? Since its modern rediscovery in 1912 by book dealer Wilfred Voynich, the manuscript has become the ultimate challenge for cryptographers and linguists. It has endured the scrutiny of the finest minds, including top American and British code breakers from both world wars, the very people who cracked the Japanese purple cipher and the German Enigma machine. They applied every tool of frequency analysis, pattern recognition, and linguistic modeling, yet the text resisted them all. The script shows a statistical structure consistent with a real language, with word lengths and character repetitions that follow natural rules, which argues against it being a random, meaningless hoax. But no one has found a cipher key, a Rosetta Stone, to unlock it. The theories about its origin are as varied as its illustrations. Some believe it is an encoded treatise on natural philosophy or medicine, perhaps containing herbal or alchemical secrets its author wished to conceal. Others propose it is written in a constructed language, or in a known language, but using a script invented from scratch. The most skeptical view is that it is an elaborate, centuries-old forgery, a nonsensical text created to defraud a wealthy Renaissance patron interested in the occult. Yet, recent analyses of the parchment and inks confirm its early 15th century origin, meaning if it is a hoax, it is a remarkably persistent and costly one made long before it had any modern notoriety. The Voynich manuscript is a different kind of historical site, a fortress of words. It sits silently behind glass, holding a conversation we can see but cannot hear. Its mystery endures not because of a lack of effort, but because it presents a perfect blank slate. Every generation projects its own questions onto those cryptic pages, seeing potential answers about lost medicine, alien botany, or secret societies. It is a mirror reflecting our own desire for discovery, proving that the most impenetrable vault is not made of stone, but of symbols waiting for a key that may never be found. A fortress of words guards its secrets, but some ancient puzzles are built not from symbols, but from gears and clay. From the silent pages of the Voynich manuscript, we move to tangible objects that whisper of a different kind of lost knowledge. Our next two sites are not temples or tombs, but artifacts of startling sophistication that challenge our assumptions about the technological timeline. The first was found not on land, but at the bottom of the sea. In the year 1901, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Decipher stumbled upon a shipwreck from the 1st century before the Common Era. Among the statues and pottery, they recovered a corroded lump of bronze and wood, about the size of a large shoebox. For decades, it sat in a museum drawer, considered a curious but unremarkable relic. Then, in the 1950s and 60s, scientists began to X-ray and study the lump. What they found inside was nothing short of revolutionary. The Antikythera mechanism, as it became known, is a complex clockwork assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and mounted within a wooden frame. Inscriptions on its casing describe astronomical and calendar functions. This was not a toy or an ornament. It was a hand-cranked, analog computer of breathtaking ingenuity. When you turned the handle on the side, a series of dials and pointers would move, predicting the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets against the backdrop of the zodiac. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even accounted for the moon's irregular orbit through a clever pin and slot device that mimicked elliptical motion, a mathematical understanding not formally attributed to astronomers for another 1,500 years. It likely also tracked the cycles of the ancient Olympic Games. This one device condenses a library of astronomical knowledge into a portable, mechanical model. Its existence implies a whole lost tradition of Greek engineering and precision craftsmanship that simply does not survive in the archaeological record. It forces us to ask how many other such devices were made. What other concepts did they understand and mechanize that we have since forgotten? The mechanism stands alone, a solitary survivor from a ship that sank while possibly carrying it from Rhodes to Rome, a snapshot of a technological peak that vanished for a millennium. A similar question of forgotten science arises from a much simpler-looking object. In the 1930s, during excavations near Baghdad, workers uncovered a small, unassuming clay jar dating to the Parthian or Sassanid period, roughly 2,000 years ago. Inside the jar was a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, and within that cylinder sat an iron rod. The top was sealed with an asphalt plug. When it was described by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, he proposed a startling idea. If the jar had been filled with an acidic liquid, like vinegar or wine, the setup would have created a basic electrochemical cell. The dissimilar metals, copper and iron, immersed in an electrolyte, would generate a small electric current around 1 volt. This artifact, dubbed the Baghdad Battery, immediately sparked a fierce debate. Was this an ancient power source? The most plausible theory is that it was used for electroplating, the process of using electricity to coat one metal with a thin layer of another, like putting a layer of gold onto a silver object. This practice was known in Mesopotamia at the time. A series of these cells connected together could have provided enough current for such delicate work. Skeptics counter that no wires or connectors were found, and that the jar could have simply been a storage container for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod acting as a core. Yet, experiments with replicas filled with grape juice do produce a measurable voltage. The mystery is not whether it could work, but whether its creators understood what they had built. Did they see it as a tool for plating, a curious effect of certain materials, or did they grasp the fundamental principle of electricity? Like the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery suggests a gap in our historical narrative. We tend to view technological progress as a straight, ascending line, but history is not a simple march forward. It is a story of peaks and valleys, of knowledge discovered, applied, and sometimes lost for centuries. These two artifacts are not necessarily proof of a more advanced global ancient technology, but they are powerful reminders of the innovative sparks that could flare brightly in isolated pockets of the ancient world. They show us that our ancestors were not just dreamers of myths and builders of monuments, but also keen observers, tinkerers, and engineers, capable of insights we are only just rediscovering. The artifacts of Antikythera and Baghdad speak to forgotten ingenuity, but what happens when that ingenuity is applied not to objects, but to the very earth itself? Beneath the quiet farmlands of China and the rocky plains of Turkey lie two of the most staggering examples of subterranean ambition ever discovered, not built upward, but carved with immense patience into the darkness below. The first was uncovered in the summer of 1992, when a farmer in Zhejiang province decided to pump water out of a small, seemingly bottomless pond on his land. What he revealed was not a natural sinkhole, but the entrance to an enormous, hand-carved cavern. This was just the first of what are now known as the Longyu Caves, a complex of at least 24 monumental artificial grottos. Stepping inside is an experience that defies logic. Each cavern is a vast, echoing space, some spanning over 10,000 square feet, with ceilings reaching 100 feet high. The walls, floors, and massive supporting pillars are all carved from a consistent, fine-grained siltstone, and they are covered from top to bottom in a mesmerizing, uniform pattern of parallel chisel marks. These are not rough gouges, but a deliberate, decorative texture, as if the walls were meticulously combed by a giant tool. The scale of the work is almost incomprehensible. Conservative estimates suggest that to create just one of these caves would have required the removal of nearly 40,000 cubic meters of stone. For all 24, that translates to over 1 million cubic meters of rock, all painstakingly quarried, hauled away, and disposed of without a trace. And this is the first great puzzle. Where did all that rock go? There is no massive spoil heap nearby, no evidence of it being used for construction in the region. The second, deeper mystery is why, who built them, and for what possible purpose. They date to a period before written records in the area, over 2,000 years ago. They show no signs of habitation, no soot from torches, no carvings or artifacts beyond the chisel marks themselves. They are not tombs, not temples, not storage facilities. They are simply vast, empty, breathtaking spaces. Some theories suggest they were secret quarries for a royal project, or perhaps ceremonial spaces for a lost religion. But the sheer, repetitive labor and the artistic effort put into the wall patterning suggests a purpose far beyond mere utility. The Longyu Caves feel like an act of devotion, a monumental secret kept by the earth itself, their original meaning erased as completely as the removed stone. If the Longyu Caves are a mystery of empty space, our next site is a masterpiece of crowded, purposeful survival. In the heart of Turkey's Cappadocia region, the landscape is famous for its fairy chimneys and soft, volcanic tuff rock. Here, in the 1960s, a man renovating his home knocked down a wall and stumbled into a hidden room, which led to another, and then another. He had accidentally rediscovered Kuyu, an entire underground city descending over 200 feet deep, and encompassing at least 18 levels. This was not a simple cave shelter. It was a fully self-contained metropolis carved into the earth, capable of housing up to 20,000 people along with their livestock, food stores, and entire cultural infrastructure. The engineering is breathtaking in its foresight. A labyrinth of narrow, sloping passages could be sealed from the inside by massive, round stone doors, each weighing up to 1,000 pounds and rolling shut like a millstone to block invaders. Over 15,000 ventilation shafts, some stretching all the way to the surface, provided fresh air to even the deepest chambers. There were stables for animals, cellars for giant clay jars of oil and wine, kitchens, dining halls, and communal spaces. There were chapels and churches, complete with carved crosses and baptismal fonts, and even rooms that appear to have been schools. This city was built and expanded over centuries, likely beginning in the 8th or 7th century before the Common Era by Phrygian peoples, but it reached its peak as a refuge for early Christians fleeing Roman, and later, Arab persecution. For weeks or even months at a time, entire communities could vanish from the surface, living in this stone hive. The scale is a humbling testament to human resilience. Derinkuyu was not built for glory, but for concealment, not to reach for the heavens, but to preserve a way of life beneath them. It represents the ultimate architectural expression of the will to survive, a hidden world carved from fear and fortified by communal hope. Together, Longyu and Derinkuyu present a profound contrast, one a beautiful enigma of empty space, the other a densely packed blueprint for perseverance. They remind us that our ancestors did not just shape the world we see, but mastered the hidden realms beneath our feet, leaving behind landscapes of shadow that still hold their breathless secrets. Buried in the highlands of Laos lies a landscape that feels like the aftermath of a giant's forgotten feast. The Plain of Jars is exactly what its name suggests, a series of sites where thousands of enormous stone jars, carved from solid sandstone and granite, lie scattered across the grassy plateau of Xingquang. These are not delicate vessels. They are monumental containers, some standing over 9 feet tall and weighing several tons, their shapes ranging from cylindrical to angular, many with a carved lip around the top. They date to Southeast Asia's Iron Age, somewhere between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after. Yet their creators left no written records, no cities, and no clear instructions. Walking among them, you are surrounded by a silent committee of stone, each jar holding its secret tight. The most widely accepted theory, based on archaeological work by French researcher Madeleine Colony in the 1930s, is that they were part of an ancient burial practice. Colony found human remains, burial goods like beads and tools, and evidence of cremation around the jars. This suggests a complex funerary ritual, where bodies may have been placed inside the jars to decompose, a practice known as excarnation, before the bones were gathered for a secondary burial elsewhere. The jars, then, would be massive, communal sarcophagi, their open mouths facing the sky as a final resting place before the spirit's journey. But the local Hmong and Lao traditions offer a far more vivid and enchanting story. They speak of a race of giants, the Kunchim, who once inhabited the highlands. According to the legend, this giant king needed to brew a colossal amount of rice wine to celebrate a great military victory over a rival. He ordered these massive jars to be carved so his people could prepare the celebratory drink. In this version, the plain is not a cemetery, but the site of a mythical, ancient party, the stone vessels holding the echo of laughter rather than bones. This beautiful dichotomy captures the site's essence. It is a place where archaeology and mythology stand side by side, neither able to fully dismiss the other. The jar's practical, solemn purpose and their legendary, celebratory one are not necessarily in conflict. They simply represent two different ways human cultures seek to explain the monumental and the mysterious. Yet, this hauntingly beautiful plain holds a much more modern and deadly layer of mystery. During the Vietnam War, the area was subjected to some of the most intense bombing campaigns in history, as it lay along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Millions of cluster bomblets were dropped, and a significant number failed to explode on impact. To this day, vast sections of the Plain of Jars remain contaminated with unexploded ordnance. This makes archaeological excavation perilously slow and dangerous, limiting our ability to fully understand the site. The jars themselves bear the scars of this conflict, some pockmarked with shrapnel, standing as mute witnesses to both ancient rites and modern warfare. So the mystery here is doubled. We seek to unravel an ancient puzzle of purpose, but we are held at bay by the lethal remnants of a contemporary one. The Plain of Jars is a powerful reminder that history is not a single, buried layer. It is a complex accumulation where the distant past and the immediate past can collide, where the quest to understand our origins can be tragically obstructed by the consequences of our own actions. The giants, whether myth or memory, left their stone questions in the earth, and we must tread carefully, both in mind and body, to even begin to search for answers. The silent jars of Laos rest in a broken landscape, but high in the Andes, another stonework stands defiant and whole, a testament to precision on a crushing scale. Perched on a steep hill overlooking the ancient Incan capital of Cusco, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman is a masterpiece of megalithic engineering that seems to defy both physics and time. Its most iconic feature is a series of 3 zigzagging defensive walls, built from limestone blocks so enormous they appear to be the playthings of gods. Walking beside them, you feel a profound sense of disproportion. The largest of these stones is estimated to weigh over 120 tons, as much as 2 modern tanks, and stands nearly 28 feet tall. They are not simple rectangles, but polygonal monsters, each with multiple complex angles and facets, and yet they fit together in a seamless, interlocking jigsaw puzzle. The joints between these colossal blocks are so tight that, famously, you cannot slide a piece of paper between them, a level of precision that would challenge modern masons with laser-guided tools. The Incas built this in the 15th century, without the wheel, without iron tools, and without mortar. The How of Sacsayhuaman is a 3-part mystery that begins in the quarry, stretches across miles of mountainous terrain, and culminates in this impossible fit. The stone itself, a dense limestone, was sourced from quarries several miles away. The transportation method, while still debated, likely involved a combination of sheer human power, ingenious engineering, and a deep understanding of their environment. One prevailing theory involves the use of earthen ramps, ropes made from leather and plant fibers, and teams of hundreds of men who would lever, roll, and drag the stones on wooden sledges. Some researchers point to the smooth, polished pathways leading from the quarries, suggesting the stones might have been slid on a lubricated surface. But the quarrying and moving, while staggering, is only half the puzzle. The true marvel is the shaping. How did they achieve that flawless fit? The traditional explanation is one of relentless, patient craftsmanship. Stonemasons would have used harder stone hammers to pound the blocks, gradually shaping them through a process of trial and error. They might have used a method called sounding, where they tapped a stone and listened to the resonance to find hidden fissures. To fit 2 stones together, they could have used a technique where the lower stone was covered in clay. The upper block was set in place and rocked, leaving an impression in the clay that precisely mapped the high points. These high points were then painstakingly ground down until the block settled perfectly. This process, repeated thousands of times, could account for the precision. Yet, the scale and perfection have fueled alternative ideas. One persistent legend speaks of a lost plant-based juice that could soften stone, allowing the Incas to mold it like clay before it hardened again. While no evidence supports a chemical softening agent, some geologists suggest they might have exploited natural fissures in the rock or used thermal expansion, heating the stone and then cooling it rapidly to cause controlled spalling. Of course, the precision has also inspired more speculative theories involving ancient advanced technology or even extraterrestrial guidance, ideas that often overshadow the real human achievement. To focus only on the how, however, is to miss the deeper purpose. Sacsayhuaman was far more than a fortress. Its zigzag walls, which some say represent the teeth of a puma, with Cusco forming the body, show it was a deeply symbolic structure, a statement of imperial power and cosmological order. It was a site for important ceremonies, a storehouse for weapons and treasure, and a formidable redoubt. The Spanish conquistadors who witnessed it in its prime were astounded. with one chronicler writing it was the greatest architectural work the Incas ever built. The stones of Sacsayhuaman do more than just fit together. They tell a story of a culture that viewed the very landscape as a sacred entity to be shaped with reverence and supreme skill. In their seamless joints, we see not a mystery of lost technology, but a monument to coordinated labor, ancestral knowledge, and an artistic vision carved into the bones of the earth itself. The seamless stonework of Sacsayhuaman was built to last for the ages, a permanent testament to a civilization's values. But in the rolling hills of modern Georgia, another stone monument was erected with a far more urgent and fleeting purpose. The Georgia Guidestones appeared almost overnight in 1980, a cluster of massive granite slabs standing 19 feet tall in a cow pasture in Elbert County. Often called America's Stonehenge, its design was stark and futuristic. A central pillar was flanked by 4 upright tablets, all capped by a heavy keystone, and it was precisely aligned to track the sun and the North Star. But it was not the architecture that captured the world's attention, it was the message. Carved into the stones in 8 different modern languages, from English and Spanish to Hindi and Swahili, were 10 guidelines or commandments for humanity. They called for maintaining the global population under 500 million, guiding reproduction wisely, unifying humanity with a new living language, and ruling passion and faith with reason. They advocated protecting people and nations with fair laws, leaving room for nature, and avoiding petty disputes for a world court. To many, these principles seemed like a rational, if stark, blueprint for a sustainable future, emphasizing ecological balance and global unity. To others, they read as a chilling manifesto for population control and globalist governance, sparking deep suspicion and controversy from the moment they were revealed. The mystery was compounded by their origin. The entire project was commissioned by a man who identified himself only as R.C. Christian, a name he later confirmed was a pseudonym inspired by the legendary founder of the Rosicrucian order, a society focused on esoteric wisdom. He approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company with detailed plans and a substantial budget, insisting on total anonymity, the true identity of R.C. Christian and the group or philosophy he represented has never been conclusively revealed, fueling decades of speculation about secret societies and New Age agendas. For over 40 years, the Guidestones stood as a physical paradox, a modern monolith preaching an ancient ideal of harmony through methods that felt uncomfortably clinical to some. Then, in the summer of 2022, the mystery took a violent turn. In the early hours of July 6th, security cameras captured a car pulling up to the site. An explosion shattered one of the massive panels. Later that morning, the entire structure was deemed unsafe and demolished by the county. While authorities arrested a suspect and cited ideological motives, the act of destruction did not erase the Guidestones from cultural memory. It etched them deeper into legend. The void they left is as potent as their presence once was. Their physical form is gone, but the questions they raised persist with new intensity. Were they a benevolent, if misguided, attempt to guide future generations through coming crises? Or were they a monument to a controversial ideology, a warning in stone that some felt compelled to literally tear down? The Georgia Guidestones now exist as a ghost, a modern archaeological site whose full story was buried twice, first by secrecy and then by demolition. They remind us that the urge to leave a message for the future is a powerful human constant, but the interpretation of that message is never set in stone. Beneath the waves off Japan's westernmost island, the ocean floor holds a structure that seems to defy the random artistry of nature. The Yonaguni Monument is a colossal slab of sandstone, rising from a depth of about 80 feet to near the surface, its silhouette unmistakably architectural against the blue haze. Discovered by a local diver in 1986, it looks like a sunken fortress or a ceremonial pyramid, complete with what appear to be wide, flat terraces, sharp-edged steps, and 2 towering pillars that stand side by side like massive gateposts. There is even a long, straight ridge that many describe as a processional road. The sheer scale is humbling, with the main structure stretching over 500 feet long and 150 feet wide. Swimming around its corners, you are confronted by a relentless geometry, with stark 90-degree angles and clean, flat surfaces that seem carved by intent, not chance. This visual evidence is what ignited a fierce and ongoing debate. Is Yonaguni a miraculous natural formation, or the drowned ruin of a civilization lost to a prehistoric flood? On one side, geologists led by figures like Professor Masaki Kimura point to the monument's compelling features. They highlight the twin pillars, which seem too perfectly parallel to be random. They identify what look like carved channels, drainage gutters, and even a relief carving resembling an animal, perhaps a turtle. The most striking element is a platform that looks like a stage, with a raised inner section and a lower outer ring, an arrangement that feels undeniably ceremonial. For those who argue for human origin, the clincher is a timeline. If this was built by human hands, it had to have been constructed when this area was above sea level, which last occurred at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. This places its potential creation millennia before the pyramids of Egypt or the stone circles of Europe, suggesting a sophisticated, seafaring culture in prehistoric Japan that history has completely forgotten, a potential real-world counterpart to the myth of a lost continent. The opposing view, championed by other geologists like Robert Schoch, argues that nature is a master architect in its own right. The rock at Yonaguni is sandstone, which naturally fractures along straight planes and horizontal bedding lines. The powerful currents in the area, along with seismic activity, could have eroded the stone along these natural joints, creating the steps, terraces, and flat platforms through entirely natural processes. The apparent carvings and animal shapes could be pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in random forms, amplified by the dreamlike quality of the underwater environment. Skeptics note that no definitive human artifacts, like pottery or tools, have been found on or around the structure itself, a significant absence for what would have been a major construction site. Yet, the mystery deepens just a short swim away. Nearby, divers have found what looks like a smaller, secondary pyramid, and on the island itself, there are ancient tombs that share a striking geometric similarity with the underwater steps. Could the people who built those tombs have also shaped the undersea monument when it was part of the coastal landscape? The Yonaguni monument forces us to confront a fundamental question about how we read the past. When we see straight lines and right angles, our minds immediately leap to human agency, to the order we impose on chaos. But the Earth itself is capable of creating profound order through its own relentless physics. Diving at Yonaguni is like floating through a Rorschach test in stone, where every viewer must decide for themselves where the boundary lies between a world shaped by nature and one sculpted by a forgotten human hand. It is a ghostly, beautiful puzzle that remains perfectly preserved in its watery museum, waiting for a verdict that the sea is in no hurry to provide. The geometric perfection of Yonaguni lies shrouded in ocean depths, but in the bright Florida sun, another stone puzzle was built in plain sight by a man who defied every expectation. The Coral Castle in Homestead is not a relic of a lost civilization, but the life's work of a single, determined individual. Between 1923 and 1951, a Latvian immigrant named Edward Lostcivilizations, who stood just 5 feet tall and weighed barely 100 pounds, single-handedly created a complex of massive stone sculptures. Using only oolite limestone, a local porous rock, he quarried, carved, and positioned over 1,000 tons of it into a bewildering array of structures, all without any outside help and, he claimed, using only simple hand tools. The results are both whimsical and mind-boggling. There is a 9-ton gate, perfectly balanced on a metal rod, that once swung open with the lightest push of a single finger. There are enormous rocking chairs carved from solid stone, a 22-ton obelisk, a Polaris telescope precisely aligned with the North Star, and a functioning sundial accurate to within 2 minutes. The scale of the individual blocks and the precision of their placement would be a challenge for a modern crew with hydraulic machinery. Yet Lostcivilizations insisted he worked alone, often at night to keep his methods secret. When asked how he accomplished such feats, he would only give cryptic answers, saying he had rediscovered the building secrets of the ancient pyramids and understood the laws of weight and leverage, as well as the forces of magnetism. This vague claim has fueled decades of speculation. Could he have mastered some forgotten principle of antigravity or acoustic levitation? Did he use counterweights and pulleys in such an ingenious way that he could move multi-ton stones as if they were feathers? Skeptics and engineers have proposed more grounded theories, suggesting he might have used a system of tripods, chain hoists, and clever fulcrums, leveraging the soft, abrasive quality of the oolite to slowly shape and move the blocks over years of painstaking effort. Yet, no one ever witnessed the crucial moments of movement, and Lostcivilizations took his precise techniques to the grave. The Coral Castle, therefore, stands as a monument to a different kind of mystery. It is not an archaeological enigma from a distant age, but a personal one from the last century. It proves that a profound secret can be hidden not in a lost language or a buried city, but in the stubborn silence and relentless work of one ordinary-seeming man. His castle is a testament to the idea that the boundary between possible and impossible is often just a matter of knowledge we have yet to uncover, or simply forgotten how to see. The silent, personal mystery of Coral Castle is a testament to one man's hidden knowledge, but in the ruins of an entire city, we find evidence of a cataclysm that defies any simple explanation. The ancient metropolis of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great centers of the Indus Valley civilization in modern-day Pakistan, is a marvel of early urban planning, with its grid-like streets, advanced drainage, and public baths. Yet scattered among these orderly ruins are pockets of a profound and unsettling mystery. In specific areas, the very bricks and stone of the city show signs of having been subjected to a sudden, unimaginable heat. They are not merely blackened by fire, but melted and fused together, their surfaces transformed into a glassy slag. This process is known as vitrification, and it requires temperatures in excess of 1,500 degrees Celsius, hotter than a typical forge or pottery kiln could produce. Walking through these vitrified zones, you are standing in a spot where the ancient ground itself turned to liquid and then solidified again, a permanent scar of thermal trauma. The immediate question is, what could have generated such intense, localized heat? Mainstream archaeology offers several plausible theories. One suggests a massive, catastrophic fire, perhaps fueled by stores of oil or grain within the city's tightly packed buildings. Another points to the possibility of a lightning strike on a key structure, though the vitrification appears in multiple, separate areas, which makes a single strike unlikely. Some researchers have even proposed that the burning of large quantities of cow dung, used as fuel, could have created exceptionally hot blazes under the right conditions. Yet for many, these explanations feel insufficient to account for the extreme temperatures recorded in the stone. This gap has allowed for more speculative ideas to take root. A handful of controversial researchers have looked at the vitrified ruins and seen something more dramatic. They note that such intense, stone-melting heat is consistent with the effects of a high-energy, rapid event, something akin to an explosion or a directed energy source. Intriguingly, this has led some to draw a tentative and highly debated connection to ancient Indian epics like the Mahabharata, which describe legendary battles involving what sound like powerful, devastating weapons. Passages speak of a single projectile charged with the power of the universe, an iron thunderbolt that reduced entire armies to ashes, and of corpses so burned they were unrecognizable. While these texts are mythological and allegorical, their vivid descriptions of destruction have fueled a persistent fringe theory that Mohenjo-Daro's vitrification could be physical evidence of an ancient, advanced technology now lost to time, a real-world event that later inspired fantastical stories. It is a theory that exists far outside academic consensus, but it persists because the physical evidence itself is so stark and unusual. The vitrified stones of Mohenjo-Daro stand as a silent, stubborn anomaly. They force us to acknowledge that our understanding of the past is still incomplete, that a city known for its peace and plumbing might also hold the secret to a sudden, violent phenomenon we cannot yet fully reconstruct. It is a reminder that history is not just recorded in artifacts and texts, but sometimes in the very chemistry of the ruins themselves, waiting for us to learn the language in which their scars are written. The city's stones can hold the memory of fire, but on a windswept island off the coast of Canada, the earth itself seems engineered to guard a secret. Oak Island is a quiet, wooded place in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, that has become synonymous with one of the world's most obsessive and costly treasure hunts. It all began in 1795, when a teenager named Daniel Maginnis noticed a peculiar circular depression in the ground beneath an old oak tree, its branches seemingly scarred by a block and tackle. He and two friends began to dig, and what they uncovered was no simple hole. They hit a layer of flagstones, then platforms of oak logs at precise 10-foot intervals. As they dug deeper, they realized they were not just excavating, they were navigating a sophisticated, ancient security system. This was the first discovery of what became known as the Money Pit, a shaft that would go on to consume fortunes, dreams, and lives for over 200 years. Every attempt to reach the bottom has been met with ingenious, frustrating resistance. At around 90 feet, treasure hunters hit a stone slab inscribed with mysterious symbols, later translated to mean, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. But just beneath that, their shovels broke through into a void, and the entire shaft began to flood with seawater. This was the pit's cruel genius, the discovery of elaborate flood tunnels, cleverly engineered channels from the ocean that would instantly inundate any dig that breached the treasure chamber. The water has proven relentless and impossible to defeat with pumps, turning every excavation into a desperate race against the rising tide. The artifacts found over the centuries only deepen the mystery. Workers have pulled up layers of coconut fiber, a material not native to Canada, suggesting tropical origins. They've found fragments of parchment, links of ancient chain, and even a crude stone cipher. Each clue is a tantalizing breadcrumb, yet none leads to a definitive prize. This void of proof has created a vacuum filled by spectacular theories. Some believe it holds the lost treasure of Captain Kidd or Blackbeard, buried far from the Caribbean. Others argue it conceals the missing original manuscripts of Shakespeare, perhaps proof that Francis Bacon was the true author. More grandiose ideas suggest it is the final resting place of the Holy Grail, or even the Ark of the Covenant, hidden by the Knights Templar fleeing persecution. The sheer complexity of the engineering lends weight to the idea that this is no pirate's hasty stash, but a deposit of immense historical importance, protected with the kind of precision that suggests a powerful, organized group. Yet for all the speculation, the true story of Oak Island is written not in gold, but in human obsession. The search has become a multi-generational saga of hope and ruin. 6 men have died in the pursuit. Families have been bankrupted. The island is a labyrinth of craters and tunnels from failed expeditions, a scarred landscape testifying to 2 centuries of what if. Modern searchers, using sonar and drills, have retrieved intriguing bits of metal and wood from deep cavities, but the central chamber, if it exists, remains elusive. The riddle endures because it is a perfect trap for the imagination, a puzzle with just enough physical evidence to suggest a monumental secret, and just enough engineering brilliance to keep it perpetually out of reach. Oak Island asks us what we are willing to sacrifice for a story, and whether the greatest treasure of all might be the relentless, heartbreaking hunt itself. The obsessive hunt on Oak Island is driven by the promise of a single, hidden prize, but in the quiet fields of Brittany, a different kind of treasure lies completely in the open, yet remains just as enigmatic. The Karnak stones are a landscape of silent soldiers, over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones arranged in meticulous, parallel rows that march across the countryside for nearly 2 miles. Erected by Neolithic people beginning around 4,500 years before the Common Era, this is not a single monument, but a vast, organized complex of 3 major alignments at Mainic, Kermerio, and Kurluskin, with solitary dolmens and burial mounds scattered among them. To walk among these granite sentinels is to feel a profound sense of order imposed upon the natural world. The stones are not placed randomly. They are graded by size, with the largest, some standing over 13 feet tall, at the western ends of the rows, gradually diminishing in height as the lines progress eastward. This deliberate organization screams of intent, a colossal project that would have required generations of sustained effort from a society with a powerful, shared vision. But what was that vision, The most persistent theory casts the alignments as a gigantic astronomical observatory. Some researchers have noted that the rows appear to point toward the rising sun at the summer solstice, suggesting they functioned as a sophisticated calendar to mark the seasons, crucial for an agricultural society. Others propose they were a form of seismic detector, with the stones positioned to amplify or measure subtle vibrations in the earth, an early warning system for earthquakes. Yet another idea sees them as a sacred processional pathway, a ritual landscape where communities would walk among the stones during ceremonies, perhaps to commune with ancestors or deities of the earth. The stones themselves, however, offer no carvings or inscriptions to confirm any of these ideas. This void has been filled by a far more colorful local legend. For centuries, the people of Brittany have told a story that these are not stones at all, but a Roman legion. As the tale goes, the legion was marching across Brittany when they were confronted by the wizard Merlin. With a wave of his hand, he turned every soldier to stone, freezing them in their tracks for all eternity. It is a myth that perfectly captures the site's awe-inspiring atmosphere, transforming a scientific mystery into a narrative of magical punishment. The truth likely lies in a combination of the practical and the spiritual. The Karnak alignments were probably multifunctional, serving as a communal project that unified scattered tribes, a celestial clock that ordered their year, and a sacred space that connected them to the cycles of life, death, and the cosmos. Their scale is the ultimate message, a declaration that this society was here. They were organized, and they could reshape their world on a breathtaking scale to reflect beliefs we can now only walk between and wonder. The ordered ranks of Karnak speak of a unified, patient society, but on the high plains of Bolivia, a different kind of stonework suggests a civilization that reached for perfection, only to have its masterpiece shattered. Pumapunku, part of the greater Tiwanaku complex near Lake Titicaca, looks less like an ancient ruin and more like the aftermath of a celestial demolition. The ground is littered with hundreds of massive stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, tossed about like a giant's discarded toy bricks. Yet as you examine the individual pieces, the true mystery comes into focus. These are not crude rocks. They are architectural components of astonishing precision, crafted from andesite and diorite, two of the hardest stones on Earth. The most iconic are the so-called H-blocks, massive slabs with perfect, razor-sharp right angles, and a series of identical, recessed geometric niches. Their symmetry is so flawless, so consistent from block to block, that they appear to have been mass-produced by some ancient, standardized process. Even more baffling are the intricate channels and notches carved into the stone. Some blocks feature complex, interlocking grooves that look like the tracks for metal clamps, though no metal has been found. Others have drill holes that are perfectly cylindrical and smooth, as if made by a modern diamond-tipped bit. The surfaces are so flat, the corners so exact, that they feel machined, a word that haunts every description of the site. This precision is the first great puzzle. How did the Tiwanaku people, who flourished from around 500 to 1,000 years after the Common Era, achieve this level of stonework without iron tools, without the wheel, and at an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet, where the thin air saps energy? The conventional explanation involves patient, generations-long labor using stone hammers and abrasive sand to slowly grind the rock into shape. Yet even proponents of this view admit the technical challenges are staggering. The consistency of the cuts across dozens of blocks suggests the use of templates or jigs, a form of prefabrication that implies advanced planning and a sophisticated understanding of geometry. This has led to more speculative theories, including the idea that the builders possessed a lost technology, perhaps a method for softening stone with a plant-based chemical agent, or used tools and techniques that have simply not survived in the archaeological record. The second, equally compelling mystery is the site's state of complete devastation. Pumapunku was not gently abandoned, it was violently destroyed. The massive blocks are not merely toppled, they are scattered, flung from their foundations as if by an unimaginable force. Some lie embedded in the earth at strange angles, while others are cracked and broken. What could have caused such catastrophic damage? The most likely culprit is a massive seismic event. The Altiplano region is tectonically active, and a powerful earthquake could have shaken the complex apart, especially if the stones were not fully interlocked at the time. Another theory points to a sudden, cataclysmic flood from nearby Lake Titicaca, a wall of water that could have swept through and smashed the structures. There is also evidence that later cultures may have quarried the site for building materials, deliberately breaking apart the stones. Yet the sheer violence of the scene continues to inspire more dramatic ideas, from a catastrophic pole shift to the impact of a cosmic event. Pumapunku stands as a two-part enigma, a testament to both breathtaking skill and utter ruin. It forces us to ask not only how they built it, but what force of nature or history was powerful enough to undo such work in an instant. The stones themselves, in their silent, geometric perfection, seem to hold the blueprint for a technology we recognize but cannot replicate, a ghost of precision frozen in a field of chaos. The geometric perfection of Pumapunku lies shattered by an unknown force, but in China, a different kind of rupture was found not in destruction, but in deliberate, careful burial. In the quiet countryside of Sichuan province, in the spring of 1986, workers digging clay for bricks struck something far more valuable than earth. They uncovered two rectangular pits, and what archaeologists carefully lifted from the soil would forever fracture the singular narrative of early Chinese civilization. This was the discovery of Sanxingdui, a cache of artifacts so breathtaking, so utterly alien to anything known before, that they seem to have fallen from another world. The pits were not tombs, but sacrificial offerings, filled with hundreds of ritual treasures made of bronze, gold, jade, and ivory, all meticulously arranged, burned, and broken before being laid to rest. And then, around 3,000 years ago, they were sealed and forgotten, leaving no written record of the people who made them. The objects themselves defy expectation. There are masks, but not like any others. Some are colossal, with angular features, exaggerated ears, and most strikingly, protruding, cylindrical eyes that seem to stare into a dimension beyond our own. One mask is over 4 feet wide. There are human-like figures, too, including a statue standing nearly 8 feet tall, the largest bronze human figure from the ancient world, dressed in an elaborate robe and standing atop a pedestal shaped like a beast. But perhaps the most mesmerizing finds are the bronze trees. One, meticulously restored, stands over 13 feet high, with a coiled dragon at its base and branches adorned with birds, flowers, and hanging fruit. It is not a mere sculpture, but a representation of a cosmic tree, a ladder connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. The technical skill is staggering, employing advanced bronze casting techniques like piece mold casting on a scale, and with artistry that rivals, and in some ways surpasses, the more famous Shang dynasty to the east. Yet the artistic vision is completely distinct. Where Shang art is often filled with recognizable animal motifs like the Taudi, and focuses on ritual vessels for ancestor worship, Sanxingdui art is surreal, almost hallucinatory. It feels less like a representation of the earthly world, and more like a direct window into a vibrant, mystical cosmology. This radical difference is the core of the mystery. Who were the Sanxingdui people? The artifacts date from the 12th to the 11th centuries before the Common Era, a time when the Shang dynasty was flourishing along the Yellow River, developing its own sophisticated culture and written language. The discovery proved that China's Bronze Age was not a single, unified story emanating from one central source, but a tapestry of multiple, powerful, and independent civilizations. The Sanxingdui culture, centered in the fertile Sichuan basin, was clearly a major contemporary, a peer to the Shang with its own rich spiritual life and technological prowess. They traded widely, as evidenced by the cowrie shells and ivory from distant regions, but they left no cities, no palaces, and crucially, no writing that we can decipher. Their entire identity is expressed through these ritual objects. The bulging eyes of the masks may represent a deity with supernatural sight, perhaps a shamanic figure who could see into the spirit world. The giant trees likely symbolize a central myth of creation and connection. This was a society obsessed with communicating with the divine through spectacle and symbol. Which leads to the final, haunting question: Why did they end it? The pits are not a hasty burial in a time of invasion. The objects were carefully placed in layers, deliberately burned and shattered in what appears to have been a grand, ritual termination. The leading theory is that this was a ceremonial decommissioning, a profound act of religious renewal. Perhaps a new king or priestly order came to power, decreeing that the old ritual paraphernalia had served its purpose and needed to be ritually killed and offered to the gods to make way for a new cycle. After this ceremony, the culture itself seems to have undergone a radical transformation, possibly migrating or being absorbed by neighboring peoples. Their city was abandoned, and their unique artistic tradition vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The Sanxingdui bronzes are therefore a double mystery. They reveal a lost world of stunning imagination, and they preserve the moment of its own intentional end. They remind us that civilizations can choose to bury their greatest treasures, not to hide them from enemies, but as the ultimate offering to their gods, sealing a chapter of their history with a reverence so complete it echoes silently for millennia. The deliberate burial of Sanxingdui's treasures was an act of profound cultural closure, but in a small Bosnian valley, a modern claim seeks to tear open the very first chapter of human history. In the town of Visoko, a series of symmetrical hills have long been considered just that, hills. But in 2005, a Bosnian-American entrepreneur named Semir Osmanagic looked at the largest one, known as Visočica Hill, and saw something else entirely. He declared it was not a natural formation, but a man-made structure, the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. He claimed it was part of a vast complex, including the Pyramid of the Moon and the Pyramid of the Dragon, all built by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. If true, this would make them the oldest and largest pyramids on Earth, dwarfing those in Giza and rewriting the timeline of advanced human culture. The claim ignited a firestorm that burns to this day, a perfect case study in the passionate clash between alternative history and established science. Osmanagic and his supporters point to a series of compelling, if controversial, observations. They argue the hills exhibit precise geometric alignment with the cardinal points, a shape too symmetrical to be random. Excavations on the Pyramid of the Sun have revealed what they describe as large, rectangular stone blocks fitted together like paving, which they call a concrete-like conglomerate. Beneath the hills, a network of underground tunnels named Ravni has been explored, revealing smoothed walls, large ceramic blocks, and mysterious, man-made mounds of material within. Perhaps most intriguing are the reports of anomalous energy readings, with claims of an energy beam or ultrasound frequency emanating from the apex of the pyramid, phenomena that some visitors say they can physically feel. For those drawn to the idea, Visoko becomes a site of immense potential, a place where a forgotten, advanced society left its mark, waiting to be recognized. The response from the mainstream scientific community, however, has been one of near-universal dismissal and frustration. Geologists from across Europe have examined the site and concluded the hills are entirely natural. They are what are known as flatirons, a common geological formation where sedimentary rock layers are tilted and then eroded over millions of years, creating those striking triangular shapes. The rectangular blocks, they argue, are natural sandstone and breccia that fracture along straight lines due to tectonic stresses, a process seen throughout the region. The underground tunnels are likely medieval mines or natural karst features, later modified. As for the energy phenomena, mainstream scientists demand rigorous, reproducible data collected with calibrated instruments, not anecdotal reports. To archaeologists, the claim is even more problematic. There is no cultural layer, no pottery shards, tools, burials, or any of the typical debris of human habitation and construction that would surround a project of such unimaginable scale. The proposed date of 12,000 years ago places it in the Paleolithic era, a time when human societies were small, mobile groups of hunter-gatherers, utterly incapable of the coordinated labor and engineering such pyramids would require. This stark divide makes the Bosnian pyramid controversy more than just a debate about rocks. It is a powerful lens on the human desire for narrative and belonging. For many in Bosnia, still healing from a brutal war, the idea that their homeland could be the cradle of a magnificent lost civilization is a source of immense national pride and hope, a story of glorious origins that transcends recent tragedy. For a global audience fascinated by ancient mysteries, it offers a tantalizing alternative to the sometimes slow and cautious academic narrative. It speaks to a deep-seated longing for a grander, more mysterious past, one filled with forgotten golden ages and advanced ancestors. Yet this desire can sometimes overlook the meticulous, if less glamorous, work of geology and archaeology, which builds understanding piece by verifiable piece. The site in Visoko, therefore, stands as a modern monument not to a lost civilization, but to a very current human phenomenon, the tension between what we wish to be true and what the evidence, patiently gathered, can support. It asks us where the line is between open-minded exploration and wishful thinking, and why the story of our own beginnings remains such a powerful and contested space. High on the limestone cliffs of the Cordillera Mountains in the Philippines, the dead do not rest in the ground, but in the air. The hanging coffins of Sagada are a sight that stops the heart, a collection of wooden caskets, some weathered almost to dust, perched on natural ledges or pinned directly into the sheer rock face. Others are stacked like solemn firewood inside the mouths of mountain caves. This is not the work of some forgotten cult, but the ancient and enduring funerary tradition of the Igorot people, a practice that stretches back over 2,000 years. To see these coffins is to witness a profound dialogue between a culture and its landscape, a solution to mortality carved from the very bones of the earth. The reasoning behind this aerial sepulture is deeply practical and deeply spiritual. In a region prone to heavy rains and seasonal flooding, placing a body in the earth risked it being washed away. The cliffs offered protection from the elements and from scavenging animals, ensuring the physical remains were safeguarded, but the elevation served a far more important purpose. By bringing their loved ones closer to the sky, the Igorot believed they were also bringing them closer to the ancestral spirits, shortening the soul's journey to the afterlife. It was an act of respect and assistance, a final lift toward the sacred. The process itself was a community ritual of immense personal effort. Before death, an elder would often choose their own coffin, traditionally a hollowed-out log. After death, the body would be smoked over a fire to slow decomposition, then tightly bound in a fetal position and placed inside the chosen log. Then came the immense challenge, hauling the coffin up the cliff. Using nothing but ropes, ladders, and sheer human strength, the community would work together to raise the deceased to their final resting place, often with the person who had died helping to prepare the ropes themselves in their final days. The higher and more inaccessible the coffin, the greater the honor, reflecting the status of the individual and the devotion of their family. Today, the practice is rare, with most Igorot now using modern cemeteries. But the ancient coffins remain, clinging to the cliffs as a powerful testament to a different relationship with death. They are not hidden away or buried out of sight, but integrated into the daily vista of the living, a constant, gentle reminder of the presence of ancestors. The silence around them is not one of neglect, but of ongoing reverence. They transform the cliff face into a sacred library, where each coffin is a volume telling a story of love, loss, and a belief that the boundary between earth and sky is the most fitting place for a soul in transition. The cliffs of Sagada hold their dead close to the heavens, but beneath the waves of the Arabian Sea, another culture believed its most sacred city was reclaimed by the ocean itself. For thousands of years, the story of Dwarka existed in the realm of epic poetry and devotion, a shimmering legend from the Hindu text, the Mahabharata. It describes a magnificent city built by the divine architect Vishwakarma at the request of Lord Krishna, a fortress of gold and silver with majestic gates, wide boulevards, and palaces adorned with jewels. The scriptures state that upon Krishna's departure from the earthly world, the glorious Dwarka was swallowed by the sea, lost to all but memory. For centuries, this was considered a beautiful allegory, a symbolic end to a divine era. Then, in the late 1980s, marine archaeologists began to survey the waters off the coast of modern-day Dwarka in Gujarat. What they found on the seabed would blur the line between scripture and history. Scattered across the ocean floor, at depths ranging from 20 to over 100 feet, lay the outlines of ancient walls. They discovered large, geometric structures made of stone blocks, some arranged in rectangular formations that suggested foundations, citadels, or protective fortifications. Among the most compelling finds were stone anchors, some with holes carved for ropes, the kind used by ancient seafaring vessels. They recovered pottery shards, including pieces of a distinctive type known as lustrous red ware, which helped date the settlement. Carbon dating of artifacts and structures pointed to a timeline between the 15th and 18th centuries before the Common Era, placing this sunken city firmly in the period of the late Indus Valley Civilization and its successors. This underwater complex, now known as the submerged city of Dwarka or Bet Dwarka, does not have golden spires, but it presents something perhaps more powerful, physical evidence of a major, sophisticated port city that thrived for centuries and then vanished beneath the waves. The discovery does not prove the existence of a divine Krishna or a city made of precious metals, but it provides a startling historical anchor for the myth. It suggests that the legend of Dwarka likely grew from a real, catastrophic event seared into cultural memory. A thriving, wealthy coastal metropolis, a center of trade and power, was gradually or suddenly inundated by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, a process that continued for millennia. To the people who survived and passed down the stories, the loss of such a great city to the relentless ocean could easily transform over generations into a tale of divine will. A grand city taken by the gods as its protector departed. The stones on the seafloor tell a story of geological reality, while the epic tells a story of theological meaning. Together, they create a profound harmony, where archaeology does not debunk the myth, but reveals the likely historical core around which the sacred narrative crystallized. The sunken city of Dwarka stands as a powerful testament to how human memory works, transforming a real trauma of loss into an enduring legend, ensuring that a city swallowed by the sea would never be forgotten. A sunken city anchors a myth in reality, but some discoveries are crafted to create a myth from scratch. The tale of the Michigan relics is a story of a mystery that was manufactured, a grand archaeological prank that spiraled far beyond its creator's intentions. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the state of Michigan became the epicenter of a bizarre collecting frenzy. Farmers, laborers, and amateur antiquarians across the state began unearthing a staggering array of objects, not from organized digs, but from plowed fields, gravel pits, and garden plots. The whole was immense, eventually numbering in the thousands of pieces. There were strange clay tablets inscribed with cryptic symbols, slate boxes with sliding lids, copper knives and spearheads, and even pipes carved with human and animal figures. Individually, they were curious. Collectively, they were revolutionary, or so it seemed, for the inscriptions and imagery on these objects were a wild pastiche of ancient cultures. Some tablets bore markings that looked uncannily like Egyptian hieroglyphs or cuneiform from Mesopotamia. Others showed figures resembling biblical patriarchs, crosses, and what appeared to be Hebrew lettering. The implication was explosive. It suggested that old world civilizations, from the Middle East and the Mediterranean, had not only reached North America long before Columbus, but had settled in the heart of the continent, leaving behind a complex record of their presence. For a time, these relics captivated the public and divided scholars. Here was tangible, if confusing, evidence that could rewrite the history books, placing ancient Michigan on the map of a global, prehistoric world. The mystery, however, was not about a lost civilization, but about the nature of belief itself. From the start, mainstream archaeologists and linguists raised glaring red flags. The inscriptions were a jumble, mixing symbols from different eras and cultures that never historically interacted. The hieroglyphs were nonsensical, not conforming to any real Egyptian grammar. The artifacts themselves showed no signs of genuine age, no patina of centuries in the soil, and they were always found in isolation, never with the surrounding debris of actual human habitation, like pottery shards, hearths, or burial sites. The materials, local clay and slate, were correct, but the craftsmanship was often crude and anachronistic. The scholarly consensus formed quickly and firmly. The Michigan relics were an elaborate, modern hoax. The true mystery then became who was behind it and why did it work so well. The trail, though murky, points to a group centered around a man named James Scotford, a self-styled archaeologist and dowser, and his associate, Daniel Soper. Evidence suggests they crafted the objects and then planted them for unsuspecting locals to discover, often guiding the digs with their dowsing rods. Their motive appears to have been a blend of profit and a peculiar form of religious propaganda. By creating artifacts that fused ancient symbols with Christian imagery, they may have been attempting to fabricate physical proof for the theory that the lost tribes of Israel had migrated to America, a belief held by certain factions of the Mormon faith and other religious groups at the time. The relics were sold to collectors and institutions, generating income and, for some, validating deeply held beliefs. The real intrigue of the Michigan relics lies not in their authenticity, but in their enduring psychological grip. Even after being exposed by experts like geologist William H. Holmes of the Smithsonian Institution, who meticulously detailed their inconsistencies, many people refused to let the story go. Those who had found the objects felt a personal connection to the discovery. The relics offered a more exciting, romantic narrative of local history than the slow, patient work of real archaeology. They tapped into a desire for a grander, more connected past, one that made Michigan a central player in an ancient global drama. The scale of the deception, with thousands of fakes circulating, created its own reality. It became a conspiracy of belief, where the sheer volume of evidence was used to argue for its legitimacy, a perfect closed loop. Today, the Michigan relics sit in museum storage drawers, labeled as curiosities and frauds. Yet they remain a powerful case study. They ask us why we are so eager to believe in certain kinds of mysteries, and how easily a story, once planted, can take root in the fertile soil of our imagination, growing far beyond the control of those who first sowed the seeds. The silent moai stand as a testament to a culture's ambition and collapse, but Easter Island holds a second, more fragile mystery, one carved not in stone, but in wood. Scattered across museum collections are just 26 precious objects, mostly wooden tablets, incised with rows of intricate, tiny glyphs. This is rongorongo, a writing system so isolated and unique that it may represent one of the few times in all of human history that writing was invented completely independently. The symbols themselves are beautiful and bewildering, a flowing sequence of stylized human forms, birds, fish, plants, and geometric shapes, arranged in a pattern called reverse boustrophedon. This means the lines of text do not simply run left to right, but rather, like an ox plowing a field, they alternate direction with each line, and the glyphs themselves are flipped upside down on every other line to be read. This sophisticated structure strongly suggests it is a true script, designed to convey specific language, not just decorative art. The tragedy is that we can see the language, but we can no longer hear it. After the societal collapse and the devastating arrival of European diseases, slavers, and missionaries in the 18th and 19th centuries, the last knowledgeable elders died without passing on the key. The few islanders who later tried to help outsiders decipher it provided conflicting and likely invented readings, leaving modern researchers with a locked door and no clear keyhole. The central debate now is not just what it says, but what it fundamentally is. Some scholars argue rongorongo is a form of proto-writing, a sophisticated mnemonic device to help ritual specialists recall chants, genealogies, or creation myths. The glyphs, in this view, would prompt the memory rather than encode the exact words. Others, pointing to its complex structure and the sheer volume of text, believe it is a full-fledged logographic script, where symbols represent whole words or concepts, potentially capable of recording the island's history, its spiritual beliefs, and perhaps even the story of its own ecological and social unraveling. The most haunting possibility is that the last rongorongo scribes carved a chronicle of their world's end, a warning in wood that we can no longer read. Every attempt at decipherment has foundered on the same rock, the lack of a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that could anchor the symbols to a known language. Without it, the glyphs remain a beautiful, silent chorus. They are the ghost of a lost voice, a reminder that knowledge itself is a fragile artifact, and that some stories, once their tellers are gone, may retreat forever into the grain of the wood. The silent glyphs of Rongorongo represent a lost voice, but in the quiet soil of Germany, a different kind of ancient language was written in wood and earth, a language of light and shadow. The Göbekli Circle is a monument of profound simplicity and deep knowledge, a wide, circular enclosure first spotted from the air in 1991 and later excavated in the early 2000s. Built around 4,900 years before the Common Era by Neolithic farmers, it predates Stonehenge by roughly 2,000 years and stands as one of the oldest confirmed solar observatories on the planet. At first glance, its remains are subtle, just concentric rings of dark soil marking where ditches were dug and wooden posts once stood. But this simplicity is deceptive, for its design encodes a precise understanding of the cosmos. The circle, nearly 250 feet across, originally had two concentric wooden palisades and an outer ditch, with 3 gates spaced evenly around its circumference. 2 of these gates, however, are not aligned with the others in a simple geometric pattern. Instead, they frame a very specific slice of the horizon. One gate points to the sunrise, and the opposite gate to the sunset, on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Standing at the center of the circle on that cold December morning, an observer would have watched the sun rise directly through the southeastern gate, its rays traveling across the enclosure to set precisely through the southwestern gate hours later. This was not a lucky guess. It was a meticulously engineered calendar in timber, built by people who needed to know when the sun would begin its return, when the days would grow longer, and the promise of spring would renew the land. This discovery fundamentally shifted our view of early European farmers. It proved that sophisticated astronomical observation was not the exclusive domain of later, more complex societies, but a crucial tool for survival from the very dawn of settled agriculture. Knowing the solstice allowed these communities to plan their planting, their harvests, and their seasonal migrations with a reliability that meant the difference between plenty and famine. The circle transformed the abstract movement of the sky into a tangible, communal event, a day marked by ceremony and watched from within a sacred architecture. Yet the Göbekli Circle holds a second, more unsettling story beneath its scientific precision. Excavations within the enclosure revealed more than just post holes. Archaeologists found fragments of pottery and animal bones, evidence of feasting and ritual offerings. Most chillingly, they uncovered human remains, including a headless skeleton, that suggest practices far darker than simple stargazing. These finds point to the possibility of ritualistic violence, perhaps even human sacrifice, tied to the solar ceremonies. This duality is what makes the site so hauntingly complete. It was not merely a Neolithic laboratory, but a temple where the cold mechanics of the cosmos met the hot, urgent needs of the human spirit. The people of Göbekli did not just observe the sun, they pleaded with it, celebrated it, and possibly offered it the ultimate gift to ensure its vital return. The circle becomes a window into a worldview where science and sacrifice were not separate, but intertwined strands of the same desperate hope. A hope carved into the German earth to mark the turning of the year and the price that might be paid for its continuity. The silent observatory of Göbekli shows how deeply our ancestors tied their survival to the sky. And on the other side of the Atlantic, that same celestial impulse is carved into a New England hillside. In the woods of Salem, New Hampshire, a jumble of stone walls, low chambers, and curiously placed monoliths sprawls across a rocky outcrop known as Mystery Hill, often called America's Stonehenge. Walking through this complex feels like stepping into a puzzle where every piece fits a different picture. There are low, lintel-topped chambers built into the earth, one featuring a massive, grooved slab dubbed the sacrificial table. There are standing stones, some with carved channels, and a sprawling network of walls that seem to enclose nothing but forest. The central question that has raged for decades is straightforward, yet the answers are anything but who built this and when. One compelling narrative, championed by alternative historians, paints a picture of astonishing antiquity. Proponents point to the site's numerous astronomical alignments. Certain stones and structures appear to line up with the sunrise and sunset on the solstices and equinoxes. One particular monolith, the astronomical standing stone, seems to function as a gnomon, casting a shadow that marks specific solar events on a carved groove in a nearby slab. This sophistication suggests to some that the builders possessed a deep, calendrical knowledge. Coupled with stylistic comparisons to ancient Celtic or Phoenician structures, this has led to theories that pre-Columbian voyagers from Europe or the Mediterranean crossed the ocean and established this site thousands of years ago, a secret outpost of the Old World in the New England wilderness. The so-called sacrificial table, with its deep gutter and drain, fuels darker speculations about ritual use, adding a layer of mystique that firmly plants the site in the realm of ancient, forgotten ceremony. The opposing view, supported by mainstream archaeologists, offers a far more recent and terrestrial explanation. They see the work of 18th and 19th century farmers. New England is famously rocky, and clearing land for pasture meant moving countless stones. The low chambers could be root cellars or food storage spaces, a common feature on colonial farms. The walls are simply the result of field clearing, piled along property lines. The astronomical alignments, skeptics argue, could be coincidental, or perhaps the work of a single, eccentric landowner in the 19th century who was inspired by reading about European megaliths and decided to create his own. There are records of the property being used as a quarry and even a potential site for a cider mill, with the grooves in stones being explained as channels for milling equipment. The truth likely lies tangled somewhere in the middle, a palimpsest of different times and hands. It is entirely possible that the core of the site has ancient Native American origins, perhaps a ceremonial space that was later modified, quarried, and reshaped by colonial settlers for their own practical needs. This layering of history is what makes Mystery Hill so fascinating and so contentious. It is a Rorschach test in stone, where every observer sees the evidence that confirms their own vision of the past. The site endures as a focal point because it speaks to a deep desire in the American psyche, a longing for a deep, mysterious history on a continent where the written record often feels comparatively young. It asks us whether we are looking at a colonial farmstead wearing the costume of an ancient temple, or if, just maybe, the costume is real. The wood and stone of Göbekli and Mystery Hill reflect a world built by people we can at least recognize in broad outline, but in the silent sands of Western China, the earth preserved faces that seem to belong to another world entirely. The Tarim Basin is a vast, arid desert, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Yet in its parched, salty soil, a series of remarkable discoveries began in the late 1980s, revealing bodies so perfectly preserved by the dry air and alkaline earth that they looked as if they had been laid to rest only decades before, not millennia. These were the Tarim mummies, and their appearance was startling. They had long noses, deep-set eyes, and light hair, some even sporting blonde or reddish-brown locks and beards. Their clothing was equally unexpected, finely woven woolen fabrics in sophisticated twills, and even tartan-like plaids, felted hats, and leather boots. They were buried with simple but evocative offerings, baskets of grain, small pouches of herbs like ephedra, and tiny baby bottles made from sheep's udders. The most famous, known as the Beauty of Lulan, dates to around 1800 years before the Common Era, her features serene and delicate, her long hair still carefully braided. The Churchan man, from about 1,000 years before the Common Era, stands over 6 feet tall, dressed in a vibrant red tunic and leggings, looking for all the world like a traveler from a distant continent who had simply lain down to sleep in the wrong desert. And that was the immediate, electrifying question: who were these people who looked so distinctly Caucasian, yet were found in the very heart of Asia, thousands of years before the documented Silk Road? The discovery appended neat historical narratives. It suggested that long before the famous east-west trade routes were formally established, individuals and entire communities from the far west had undertaken epic journeys across the steppes and mountains, settling in the Tarim Basin oases. For a time, theories swirled wildly, some suggesting they were lost Roman legionaries, or remnants of Alexander the Great's armies, or a lost tribe of Israelites. The truth, revealed by advanced genetic studies in the 21st century, is both more nuanced and more profound. DNA analysis shows these mummies were not recent arrivals from Europe, but descended from an ancient population of ancient North Eurasians, a group with deep roots in Siberia. They were essentially a prehistoric eastern branch of the same steppe peoples, whose later migrations would shape Europe and Asia. Their isolation in the Tarim Basin preserved their distinctive physical features and their material culture, like that striking plaid cloth, which shows a textile technology remarkably similar to that found in contemporary cultures thousands of miles to the west. Their presence is not an anomaly, but a clue. It paints a picture of a prehistoric world that was already interconnected, where ideas, technologies, and people moved across vast distances along invisible pathways of grass and desert long before history wrote their names. They were not lost. They were at home in a landscape that was far more cosmopolitan than we ever knew. The Tarim mummies are silent ambassadors from a forgotten network, reminding us that human curiosity and movement have always been forces powerful enough to cross continents, leaving their legacy not in stone cities, but in the strands of hair and weave of cloth that whisper of a world without borders. The faces in the Tarim Desert remind us that ancient peoples left their mark in the most intimate of ways, but others chose a canvas of impossible scale. In the stark, sun-baked expanse of the Colorado Desert along the lower Colorado River, the earth itself holds figures so vast you can only truly know them by leaving the ground. These are the Blythe intaglios, a collection of giant geoglyphs etched into the desert floor near the town of Blythe, California. To stand beside one is to see only trenches of disturbed gravel, but from a few hundred feet in the air, the view transforms completely. The scraping away of dark, iron-rich desert pavement reveals the lighter, creamy soil beneath, creating colossal outlines that emerge like ghosts from the landscape. A human figure stretches 171 feet from head to toe, its arms outstretched. Nearby, a spiral coils next to a distinct quadruped, often interpreted as a mountain lion or a horse, though its identity is debated. There is a second human form and another animal, perhaps a serpent. Together, they form a silent committee of giants, a gallery for the gods or the clouds. This is a Nazca-like tradition in North America, but with a character all its own, created by Native American cultures, likely the ancestors of the Mojave or Quechan peoples. Their age is broadly placed between 450 and 2,000 years ago. The method was simple, yet the coordination it required was profound. Groups would have carefully scraped back the layer of dark, packed pebbles known as desert varnish, piling them along the edges of the figures to create defining lines. In this hyper-arid environment, their work was preserved, a testament in patience, but the enduring question is, why create art you cannot see? The most compelling answers lie in the worldview of the river tribes. For the Mojave, the Colorado River was the central artery of life, and their identity was deeply tied to the landscape. These intaglios may have been ceremonial figures, representing mythic ancestors or deities central to their creation stories. The largest human figure could be Mastamho, the powerful creator god who gave the Mojave their land and laws. The animal forms might symbolize clan totems, marking territory or commemorating a significant event. Another theory connects them to the cosmos. Certain alignments of the figures may have pointed toward significant celestial events, like solstice sunrises or the path of important stars, serving as a giant calendar etched into the earth. Unlike the Nazca Lines, which often feel like precise, abstract pathways, the Blythe intaglios are unmistakably representational, giant pictographs meant to be seen from above. This suggests their primary audience was not human, but spiritual. They were messages or offerings to the deities in the sky, or perhaps physical manifestations of those deities themselves, their true form only visible from the perspective of the spirit world. They transformed the desert floor into a sacred map, connecting the people to the mythic geography of their beliefs. Their rediscovery by modern society came oddly from the air, when a pilot flying a route from Blythe to Las Vegas in 1932 looked down and saw the giants no one on the ground could fully perceive. Today, they are protected, yet fragile, fenced off to prevent damage from unaware footsteps. They ask us to reconsider the very nature of a monument. These were not structures built upward toward the heavens, but drawings made for a heavenly view. a profound act of faith that the most important witnesses were not standing on the earth, but looking down upon it. In their silent, sprawling forms, we see a different kind of communication, a prayer made not with words, but with the desert itself. And there you have it, 30 glimpses into a world that refuses to be fully explained. We have stood before stones moved by giants, real or imagined, and peered into manuscripts written in a language without a key. We have walked with ancestors who buried their greatest treasures and others who carved their prayers so large only the sky could read them. Each of these places, from the sunken stones of Yonaguni to the whispering walls of Pumapunku, is a crack in the smooth surface of the past. They are not anomalies to be corrected, but invitations to wonder. They remind us that history is not a simple timeline in a textbook, but a deep, dark forest filled with clearings of light we are still discovering. Our ancestors were not primitive figures waiting for progress to find them. They were explorers, engineers, artists, and dreamers, confronting the same fundamental mysteries of existence that we do today, and leaving their answers etched in the landscape itself. Their legacy is a challenge to our own certainty, a spark for our imagination. So, which of these 30 windows into the unknown resonated most deeply with you? Was it the silent, staring giants of Easter Island, or the cosmic calendar of Göbekli, the personal obsession of Coral Castle, or the communal mystery of the Karnak stones? Let that conversation continue in the comments below. And if this journey through history's strangest corners has left you wanting more, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap that notification bell. There are countless more mysteries waiting just beyond the edge of the map, and we will keep exploring them together. Thank you.